Howdy folks, Joe Howard here. So, a few announcements before we get started with today's episode. Number 1, the WPMRR community. So, you may have seen on Twitter, but we have launched a online community built on Circle for WPMRR. You can go to community.wpmrr.com to sign up. If you are a business owner, an agency, a freelancer, a WordPress professional, and you want to tackle your subscription business or the subscription revenue part of your business, you want to make it better, we're doing that together in the community. It's kind of like the podcast here, except you actually get to be a part of it. You don't just have to listen to me talk your ear off every week. So come join us. It's going to be a good time. community.wpmrr.com. Number 2, the WPMRR Virtual Summit. So we are throwing our second virtual summit this year. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be better. It's going to be more MRR-tastic this year. So that is coming up September 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. We've got 3 days of great content for you this year as opposed to 2 last year. We're still doing day 1, sales, marketing, content, that kind of work. Day 2 is going to be more operations focused, ops, systems, hiring, team management, all of that jazz. We're adding a day 3 this year, which is specifically geared towards website management. That's going to be a really cool day. I'm really excited for that day. It's something a little different, something I don't think you'll get at any other online conference, a day completely dedicated to website management. So how do you get signed up? We are live streaming the entire event through the community on Circle. So can again, just go ahead and go to community.wpmrr.com and get signed up, get logged in, earn some cool badges there in the community, and you'll already be automatically signed up to attend the summit later this year. Cool. Number 3, we are accepting sponsorships for the summit this year. We didn't do it last year. We did it fully self-funded last year, but we wanted to, again, do things bigger and better this year. So we are accepting sponsorships for the summit this year. So if you or your business is interested in sponsoring, the demand has been like way higher than I thought it was going to be. Like they're selling very fast. So I'm truly not just saying this to like create some like fake scarcity thing. It's like, no, like they're selling pretty quickly. So by the time this podcast episode comes out, it'll be about a week after recording, so it'll be even tougher to get a sponsorship. So if you're interested in doing a legacy, a sustainability, a growth sponsorship, just go to the sponsors page on the website, submit an application. You can also message me directly in the WPMRR community if you want to chat about it directly. It is community.wpmrr.com. Okay, enough for the announcements. Let's get into today's episode. Today I got to sit down and chat with Artur Grabowski. Artur and I have known each other for a little while in the WordPress space. I have been pretty familiar with the work his company's doing, but it was really cool to be able to sit down with him and really pick his brain. Artur's a really smart guy, and he's really thoughtful in everything he has to say, and he's very nuanced in his perspective. And he's just one of those people who, when he's talking, you just like intrinsically trust that he knows exactly what he's talking about because that's just how he comes off. So it was interesting hearing about how he's growing Extendify. Him and his co-founder have raised funding for the company. They have big dreams. They want to go big with this company. That's going to be their goal. They're solving an enormous challenge for everybody in the WordPress space that you'll hear about in the podcast episode, but excited to see where Extendify goes in the future. They're in beta right now, but I think they're going to come out of the blocks running on this one. So, okay, that was an extended intro. So without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Enjoy the episode. All right, we are live on the podcast this week with Artur Grabowski. Artur, am I saying your name right? Did I get that all right?
Yeah, no, that's right. That's what it's originally Artur. I'm originally from Poland, but Artur just makes it easier for everyone. So Artur's good.
Artur. Cool. Well, thanks for making sure I got the pronunciation right, and happy to have you on the podcast. I know you and some of the stuff you do in WordPress, but tell folks who are listening a little bit about all the stuff you do. Clearly, you're a big WordPress fan. You can see your T-shirt. You're a WordPress guy.
Brought it out just for you. I did.
Yes.
So I'm Artur. I mean, my quick background is, in the grand scheme of things, I'm relatively new to WordPress. I think relative to, yourself and some of your listeners, I imagine. My background, I started way back on the software development side. And then most recently, the past few kind of adventures I've been on in the business world have been at Adobe in San Francisco. So I was at Adobe for a few years. As Adobe was going through the transition for the Creative Cloud from boxed licensed software to subscriptions. And so got to support that team in various ways, including some acquisitions and investments in and around the creative tools, such as VR, 3D, 3D texturing, those kinds of things. Helped Adobe set up their early stage fund for design, which is a very early stage seed fund for investing in companies. And from Adobe, when my wife and I, we moved from San Francisco to Cleveland, when our first kiddo was born, I joined Automatic. And so I was at Automatic for a bit. Automatic working on a variety of things, but it was really my first deep dive into WordPress, which was amazing. Got to spend a lot of time with those brilliant folks there, with Matt and the kind of crew there across WordPress.com and Woo and Jetpack and VIP and all those offerings, which was awesome. And there it was kind of a variety of things focused on growing Automatic, whether that was some acquisitions in and around the WordPress space, some acquisitions, investments outside of WordPress like Tumblr, some other kind of like strategy and operations work. And that was kind of first real deep dive for me in WordPress space. And it's also where I met Chris Lubkert, my brilliant co-founder in what we're working on now, which is Extendify. And so we left Automatic a little bit ago now and have been working on Extendify, which is, we're really bringing a modern kind of digital experience interface to WordPress for largely targeted SMBs who want kind of a very modern, almost like Wix or Shopify-like onboarding, site creation, product discovery experience in WordPress, and really bring that to open source. So we've been working on that for a little bit now, and we're super excited there. So we can dive into that some more. But anyway, that's kind of the quick version of my background.
Yeah, cool. I love the stuff you have going over at Extendify. I'm on the site now. It's like there's this challenge. I feel like most people in WordPress understand this, like WordPress is a great way to build a site, but the onboarding is pretty tough for new people. Like to get a site up and like rock and rolling, like is hard. You're just like attacking that problem straight on. So I definitely want to get into Extendify stuff here in this episode. I also do want to hop a little bit more into your background because I've talked with you a little bit kind of before we recorded this podcast, and not just like the minutes before, but we've known each other for a little while now. You struck me as someone who is technical, but I'm not sure if your background is more technical or if it's more in like the business side of things, maybe some marketing and like acquisition stuff you mentioned maybe made me think like maybe you're a little bit more into that side of the business.
Totally. Yeah. So I started out really early on. It was a family of developers. My first development gig was in a kind of a R&D setting, a company that was making capacitance measuring systems for like the military and stuff, and working on the operating system there. It was like in assembly, like really old school stuff, really not sexy software development. And then did a little bit of front end development for a very traditional sort of Silicon Valley startup. But then made a hard pivot into the business world. And so I've been doing a lot of business stuff for a long time, whether that's acquisitions and investments or kind of growth and operations. And so the majority of my career at this point has been on the business side, but I lean on the technical part of it daily. Whether we're in, at work, we're in GitHub and we're talking about some product development, or just kind of like keeping up with the latest of what's going on in WordPress. I lean on that side, even though I don't write any code. Right, the closest I really get to writing code now is some if statements in a Google sheet. That's about it. So it's super valuable, even though I don't actually get in the code base anymore.
Yeah, I guess you find that your technical background and some of your technical experience help you to now manage a technical product from a business perspective. I'm not super technical. Like I'm probably even levels of technical. I'm like levels lower than you in a technical capacity. And sometimes I do wish I had a little bit more of a technical know-how just so I could know like how hard something's going to be or like how long something's going to take. I kind of rely on my team to tell me that stuff a lot of the time, but it would be helpful if I think it would be helpful if I had more of an idea of that kind of information. So I could from a business standpoint, like make better bets on things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that. And I'll tell you that like there's a downside in that I think it's easy to get overconfident in technical knowledge, like for myself and I think our team has we have a healthy environment of challenging each other and we'll just say like, hey, like Artur, that's not how it is. Like that doesn't work, or this is going to take longer, or whatever. So I think really what it comes down to for me is I try to, even though I'm sure I cross this line all the time, I try to not make recommendations as much as lean on my technical knowledge to ask better questions. That I just try to understand like what are the problems, what are our options, and but it's easy to like be overconfident in something like that, and especially some of the technologies that we're using for the stuff we're building I've never worked with, so I don't even know what the limitations of them are. I'm kind of leaning on like general frameworks, and right. I mean the reality is I'm guessing you actually, I mean I think you're being humble. I think the reality is like you have that context as well, and that's probably as far as you need to go. Like I don't If I get too in the weeds, I think it's just a distraction for the team.
That definitely may be true. I know of a lot of technical founders who are like too involved in things, and they almost know like too much. It's like sometimes I felt like in my experience, it's been somewhat of an advantage not knowing some of this stuff because I have to ask other people, or I have to lean on other people, or I have to like not be as involved. So in some ways, maybe a disadvantage, but also in some ways advantage, like everything in business, I think you understand everything is pretty contextual. So, cool. And now you're working on Extendify. So let's talk about Extendify because I mentioned earlier when we were talking, like onboarding for WordPress is really challenging. It's a challenge area, I think, for WordPress in general. A lot of people go to these competitors. They go to Wix, they go to Squarespace, they go to Shopify because you can like whip something up really quick, right? And that is probably a space where those companies have an advantage over the WordPress ecosystem. You're trying to shift that a little bit. You're trying to bring some of that experience from some of those other places into WordPress. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can correct me if you feel like my wording isn't totally right here, but I think that's a big like mountain to climb. So I want to hear a little bit more about Extendify, which is in beta right now. That's and pushing into, I guess, go out of beta at some point. So just tell me a little bit more about stuff going on at Extendify.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the reality is I don't think anything that I can say here about what we're doing is going to be like a light bulb moment for anyone. Like we're not, we didn't have some epiphany that WordPress long-timers, WordPress experts haven't already had. So this isn't a case of we're like, like this is going to be a completely new idea that we're pursuing. I think it comes down to the fact that WordPress is this amazing tool, and it serves whatever all those like wild stats are about the percentage of websites that it powers, etc. And is such a strength. It is also inherently a limitation where WordPress, because it is built for everyone, it's not really built for anyone. And that is sort of it has to be that way, because if you're both powering, like my cooking blog, and you're powering Facebook's marketing pages and everything in between, you're you're going to have to be a generalist. WordPress is going to have to be a generalist and cater to all those use cases. And that means that individuals who have a simpler use case, potentially a blogger, especially as a more casual blogger, it can be well served. Someone who has a huge budget for custom development, etc., can do really well with leveraging all the expertise that exists in the WordPress ecosystem to build a truly bespoke digital experience for them. There's this kind of middle ground of largely SMBs for whom their website is mission critical, but they don't have that endless budget to build a completely custom experience, for whom WordPress remains a challenge. I mean, a lot of these users sign up for WordPress, they think they're getting Wix, and instead they get WP Admin. And again, that's not, I think, news to anyone that's listening to this podcast, but it continues to happen. And I think one of the most telling data points comes from hosts in the WordPress ecosystem. And we keep close with those folks, and they're such an important kind of cornerstone to WordPress being successful. And when you talk with hosts and you ask them about market dynamics and competitors, it's quite rare for them to bring up other WordPress hosts as primary competitors. Really, they talk about users churning to Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, kind of the usual suspects. And as a result, their retention rates tend to be quite low, whereas user acquisition costs are pretty high for hosts. It is kind of, whether it's advertising or content or whatever, it's pretty expensive to acquire a user. And a lot of those users that do churn over to those other platforms do tend to be pretty valuable users in terms of the investment they're willing to make in their website. And at the end of the day, that investment, whether it is the hosting they're buying, the plugins they buy, the themes they buy, all of that is money that, if it was staying in WordPress, would make us all better off, would grow the pie, would make open source stronger, would invest more resources back into these products so the products can evolve. But instead, a lot of those dollars end up churning to these other platforms. And one of the just shocking stats is, in WordPress, the largest product developers, so let's ignore hosts for a second, but the largest product developers in the WordPress space often get stuck in this kind of like revenue ceiling of a few $1 million. And it's quite rare for a WordPress product developer to exceed that amount. Whereas in Shopify, you have product developers, plugin developers, generating well over $100 million of revenue. And that makes it really challenging for those WordPress developers to then hire enough, product folks, support folks, et cetera, to build these really world-class experiences for their users that make it just easy and delightful and super effective to build that experience purely on WordPress. And so anyway, that's a long way of saying that we think that, especially in the SMB part of the WordPress ecosystem, there's a lot of room for improvement, and that's really where we're focused.
Yeah. I buy all of that. I think it's an interesting space to be in. There are probably a lot of companies in this space trying to tackle this problem other than Extendify. I don't know if you've done I don't know if you're like into competitor analysis or like checking out what other companies are doing, or if you're more focused on just like, hey, let's stay on our road. But how are you at Extendify like differentiating yourselves against the other companies in your space? And I ask because I'm usually thinking about, I want to be WP Buffs to be unique. I want WPMRR to be a unique community. I want it to be a place where people can go that you can't just kind of run somewhere else to get the same experience. Are there things that you're thinking about as you're in beta to make the experience at Extendify unique, above and beyond maybe some of the experience folks can get at other similar companies? Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, we're not the only ones or first ones to kind of see this challenge that users are facing, and we're not the first ones to try to tackle it. I would say, kind of two comments at the highest level. One is, I do believe that broadly in business, a lot does come down to execution, and that two similar solutions can lead to very different business outcomes based on execution. So even if there were other products out there, like we think that we have just a really strong team, and we're and a strong vision, and we're just very focused on prioritizing what is most important, and we're able to execute against that, and we can be successful even if other folks are attempting to accomplish the same thing. That said, one of the core tenets of what we've set out to do is to build something very closely tied to Gutenberg. We've been strong believers that Gutenberg is the future from well before we left Automatic. That was a core premise of us setting out to work on Extendify, is that Gutenberg is the future. Folks are starting to experiment with it, but most of these are kind of experiments. Some block libraries, etc. They're people are testing what are the limits of Gutenberg, but they're still relatively limited. And unlike some other products out there that try to help users get onboarded and build a really effective digital presence, etc., by building ours completely on Gutenberg, we are doing a few things. We're not introducing a new experience for users. So you don't have to learn a new editor, a new whatever to work with Extendify. We're really extending, hence the name, we're extending the core experience of WordPress to certain use cases where WordPress is falling short today. That also means we are getting the benefit of all the performance benefits of Gutenberg. So there's a lot of this that sort of bounces around Twitter and whatever, but in these various comparisons of Gutenberg to whatever other solution, whether in WordPress or outside of WordPress, and Gutenberg is super fast. And we value that, and we want to leverage Gutenberg to its fullest. Now, we also appreciate that Gutenberg is still early. I often talk about products going through this continuum of, it starts as a technology, kind of through R&D, it starts as a technology, then it moves to be a product, and then eventually it becomes a solution that really solves people's problems, and people are really excited to invest in that. Gutenberg has kind of made this journey from technology to product, but I think it's still not a solution, and there's lots of investment going into it. It's slowly trending that direction, but there remain many gaps, and one of the ways we're filling those is we've brought on a couple just incredible products into the Extendify family. Those include Editor Plus and Editor's Kit. Editor's Kit was just an acquisition we announced just a couple weeks ago. And these are tools that really extend the core Gutenberg functionality with additional features to make it both really easy to kind of move additional levers, have additional toggles for control over Gutenberg, and also just more power to users. So whether you are a power user and you want to have access to functionality you don't otherwise without writing code, or just kind of like the simpler functionality, you just want it to be accessible with just a couple mouse clicks. Either way, Editor Plus and Editor's Kit are really the tools for doing that. And so we are, not only are we fully leveraging Gutenberg, we're trying to extend it a little bit as well. And the reality is we want to be on the forefront of what's happening with Gutenberg, whether that is full site editing or global styles or what have you. We want to bring all of that into Extendify so that as more and more users adopt Extendify, we are also pushing people deeper into Gutenberg. And so Gutenberg adoption is accelerated. And I think that is a win-win for just everyone in WordPress.
What do you think about Gutenberg, the move from Classic Editor to Gutenberg? Like, when you say, I guess my question is like, when you say Gutenberg is a future of WordPress, do you say that because you used to work at Automatic and like Matt has said it 100 times and we've decided that Gutenberg is the editor and like that's it, like that's the decision? Or do you actually truly enjoy the experience of Gutenberg? Is it obviously not perfect, but I mean, I totally agree with the speed thing. Like performance, it's like it's got accessibility. Maybe it's still lacking some stuff. So what are your kind of overall thoughts about, as someone who may be a little bit biased, having worked Automatic, regardless, what are your just general thoughts on Gutenberg as a company that's now kind of tying themselves to the future of Gutenberg and the future of WordPress?
Yeah, totally. So my belief in So let's like if we kind of like leave the Gutenberg branding to the side, although I think
Sure.
some of that team's actually has been trying to distance themselves from Gutenberg anyway. But if we think about it as the block editor, and so I'll actually go back to my time at Adobe. So at Adobe, and we had various website building tools. Some of the more recent ones fell in a category of products called Spark. There were these tools for super easily creating, whether it's social media posts or a really simple kind of a video presentation, or also a super simple landing page or website. And as part of that process, I got to spend time with pretty much every kind of innovative new website building tool that's out there, all the ones that you've heard of. And it became very clear to us, and this is circa 2016 maybe, it was very clear to us that block-based editing was the future. And this kind of brings me to this idea I sometimes like when people talk about technology is the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And people often apply that to, for example, self-driving cars. Like self-driving cars are here already, and there are people in parts of the world that won't have access to them for 20 years. So for them, that's the future. But for other people, it's the present. And so the future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. And the reality is, I think that block-based editing has been here for years. It just hasn't been in WordPress. So for WordPress folks, especially those who use the classic editor, it's this new thing. Like we're developing in the wild. It's this R&D. Like who knows if it'll work? We know that it'll work. Like it works elsewhere. Like this, I think there's a lot less unknown here about the end state than people realize. Now, even though the end state is known, that doesn't mean that the journey there is super clear, because WordPress is so big, you have to make it a smooth transition for everyone. You have to make it work with all these things, whether they're plugins or themes or whatever. So the journey may not be clear, but the endpoint has kind of been known for a while, even if it hasn't been known in the WordPress space. And so that's why, when I joined Automattic and people were talking about the block editor, it was just the most obvious thing in the world. Like, of course, that's where we're headed. Of course, that's going to be successful. And it's been true of the larger kind of Wixes and whatever, but also of all the small tools out there that maybe some folks haven't heard of, but are just doing really cool things in the space. So I feel a lot of conviction behind this, and that bias is only slightly resulting from my time at Automattic.
Goddamn, that was a good answer. I feel like I kind of threw a little bit of a curveball there. I was like, oh, you kind of used to work at Automattic. Like, what do you think about Gutenberg? And you just kind of nailed that one. So very nice. I can see so many advantages in Gutenberg, especially as it continues to evolve from just being I'll reference it as you have as a block editor, into what potential full site editing could look like. That is the step that takes WordPress from WP admin into more, maybe it's still some WP admin, but it's really shifting more into a block-based full site editor, which is much more the experience of some of the other competitors we were talking about, which would reduce some of that churn into those other companies. It would make WordPress in itself much more attractive, I think, to new users. Lots of interesting stuff. I did have a quick question about, because you've talked about a few things that in my mind, suggests the company, it suggests something financial about Extendify, because you mentioned you have a team working on stuff. You mentioned you have you've done an acquisition. I guess it kind of leads me to the question of like, what's the funding structure behind Extendify? Is it like personally financed by you? Have you raised any money for Extendify? Is it revenue, bootstrapped? Is it revenue funded? It's just kind of very successfully and pretty quickly revenue funded through like a successful beta. What does that look like?
Yeah. So the core product is in beta right now. We will take it. We're not following like the Gmail or Google Maps route of having something in beta for 10 years. We will take that out of beta soon here. We've gotten just awesome user engagement, and we're excited to kind of get the full tool in folks' hands. So we did. So Chris and I, we did raise funding for Extendify. We raised funding last year and are just super excited about the folks that were excited about the vision, the opportunity, and wanted to back us and really see the next kind of see what we're doing, push WordPress forward. So we have not lots. We have several investors from both kind of the WordPress ecosystem and outside of the WordPress ecosystem. Our lead investor is someone we've been super excited about, a group called Village Global, and they are an investor in the traditional sense, but even more importantly, they're a community of technology leaders who are bring both capital, but just bring a level of expertise about growing a software business that you don't get elsewhere. And so these are kind of like well-known folks who've been successful in building software companies, and that's invaluable. And so, like I mentioned, we also have some folks from the WordPress ecosystem who've built some of the larger, if not the largest, businesses in the WordPress world, and we really view this as, if we're successful, then we're going to push WordPress forward, and everyone else is going to be successful. Whether you're building a theme in WordPress, you're building a plugin, you're a host, you are a service company, either an agency, or you're helping people maintain their sites, or whatever you're doing, if we are able to onboard and make more WordPress users successful, every single one of those stakeholders is going to have a healthier business, have more resources to invest back in their product, back in their services, back in their support, and build a better, stronger ecosystem. And that's why these folks are excited to invest in Extendify, is they see that. They're like, this is a tide that rises all ships. This is such a universal experience for so many users. We knocked this out of the park. We are bringing lots of folks over from the Wixes, the Squarespaces, et cetera, and it's super valuable. And that really is what has gotten people excited. And it's great. I mean, it's a kind of level of that sort of community of engagement of folks who want to see us succeed, who believe in the mission. And you can always have champions for your business. You can always have people who are coaches or just like friends in the ecosystem who want to support you, et cetera. But then when people have actually invested a stake in what you're doing, they really feel engaged. They really feel like they are part of the mission. They really feel like they're part of what we're doing. And whether that means they will sort of pick up the phone whenever we need them, or sometimes it's giving us just really honest feedback, even if that feedback's not what we were hoping to hear, they feel really kind of committed to what we're doing. They feel really bought into what we're doing. And that's super valuable. And the fact that we've been able to bring on some sort of kind of well-known personalities and folks have been successful. And I'm sort of intentionally not naming folks because I try to keep confidentiality of folks, respect their confidentiality. But it is super valuable to us to have that kind of support.
I think it's smart to raise funding both from people internal to WordPress and from people external to WordPress. I think it gives you probably a good mix of knowledge, of experience, of backgrounds, of people to lean on to drive the product forward. People from the WordPress space who know how the WordPress community works, who know how to grow WordPress in that, or grow a company in that space. Also, people external to WordPress who honestly may not have some of the biases that some of the people in WordPress have. WordPress is a small community. Yeah. It may be big for some people, but in the grand tech scheme, it's a small open source community, and at least the core community folks, the folks go to WordCamps, the folks that contribute to core, that kind of people, folks like us. Yeah. But people from outside may have different ideas about how to scale a tech business, maybe regardless of some WordPress stuff, and that may be very helpful as well. Totally respect not mentioning certain folks, no worries there. That kind of leads me to my next question, which is, I think a lot of people in the WordPress community can, if they think about funded companies, they could name a few off the top of their heads of companies that have been funded and grown to pretty substantial sizes. The one I usually have at the top of my head is Elementor, which is page builder that raised money and now is arguably the leading page builder in the space. I don't know how arguable it is anymore. Maybe at this point it's that they are the de facto page builder in terms of how they would probably measure success, which is in market share and in terms of number of users, more traditional metrics. It sounds like, because you mentioned before, hey, if we're successful here at Extendify, like we'll have touch points with everybody in the WordPress space. I mean, if you think to Extendify 5 years into the future, maybe it's 3 years into the future, maybe it's 2 years, you've been successful with this. You've launched out of beta, you're successful. I mean, does Extendify have a team of 500 folks working on it? Are you running and managing a team or a product that has, reached a significant scale and continues to grow? I'm interested to hear if is that where you see the company in the future? Is that where you want the company to be?
Yeah, I think the opportunity and the problem is significant enough that it's certainly it would be easy to justify growing a large team and really investing in this. We are, I think, something that's a little different between us and I think what you sometimes hear about with kind of traditional Silicon Valley type venture-backed startups. None of us are in Silicon Valley. Is that mentality of growth at any cost, and some of those companies are tend to be on these trajectories where they will run out of cash every few months because they're just constantly spending. They have to raise more funding nonstop, and there's potentially not even the idea of generating revenue. They're just let's just get users, and that's the most important thing, and then we'll figure out revenue later. And we think it's important to grow sustainably. We think it's important to grow with our user base, and not get to the point where we've built such a big team that now we have to do things we don't want to do from a product or business perspective just to support that team. But yeah, I think the reality is that there is an opportunity for WordPress product businesses to get quite large. I mean, with a couple of exceptions, the biggest these teams ever get are 20, 30 people. And again, that doesn't really make sense when you compare it to other ecosystems. Maybe it's a Shopify ecosystem or other open source ecosystems where folks have created much bigger teams. And if we're really, with our journey of really becoming that experience for any SMB that's trying to be successful on WordPress, well, that's massive. That's millions and millions of websites. It's tens of millions of users. And yeah, that certainly will justify a large team on our end, and we'll grow that sustainably and over time. And there's no question that the ecosystem can support that. To date, really, that has come just in the hosting stakeholder segment where companies have gotten that big, but the future has to be more broadly on the product side. And you've seen a lot recently on the acquisition front in the WordPress ecosystem, and there's consolidation and whatever. So who knows exactly what that means for product companies growing to a certain size. It might mean that before certain product companies reach this kind of escape velocity to grow bigger, they may get swallowed up. That might be the case. Who knows exactly? I think probably the acquisitions in WordPress are overheated right now. I think you're going to hear 12 months from now, maybe, that quite a few of those have not been successful. Products will be either shut down or teams will get downsized, and some of this acquisition stuff will kind of cool off. And maybe that'll be kind of the next phase in the cycle where people are building new things again and growing teams organically. And anyway, the cycle will come back and forth. But yeah, but I'm excited to grow our team, and I think other product companies in the WordPress ecosystem will grow theirs as well. And I look forward to Extendify supporting them in that.
Cool, man. I'm excited to share this episode on Twitter in 5 years and be like, hey, I had Artur on my podcast 5 years ago, and look at him now. He's too busy. Look at all this amazing stuff he's doing. So yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
So okay, beta, coming out of beta soon. I want to get a little more tactile into the beta stuff because I don't see a ton of companies doing like deciding like we're going to do a beta as opposed to like, I guess like betas could be the same as whatever an early access thing is. But
yeah,
I guess I'm just interested for people listening who have a potential product or potential thing they're doing. They're like, I want to, like soft launch this and like get a few users in and get feedback from them and make it, maybe not potentially launch an MVP, but launch like an MVP version 2 or 3. That's not the like earliest stage thing, but it's got enough to like stand on 2 legs to really like launch something, which is probably important for a product that's aiming to be a centerpiece of WordPress. Like I think about like the WPMRR community, which was recently launched. We had this idea of like a beta, but it was just like, we'll just get a few people in and get some feedback and like add some spaces, remove some spaces, like get conversations going, and then we'll launch it big. And like my personality is like, I'm really impatient. So I was like, sure, that sounds good. And then a week later I was like, forget this. Like, let's just invite everyone and like, we'll figure it out along the way. So obviously that's not how you run a beta. But as someone who obviously has higher stakes than just launching a community and a hangout for a place for people to grow subscription businesses. Tell me about what it's like and maybe some of the steps of running a successful beta for a company that has, a big potential trajectory in front of them. I'd love to know any like little details or the process of what it looked like to run that as a team.
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it comes back to how we think about the development of Extendify. So I'm sure you, Joe, and every single one of your listeners had the same experience of using some WordPress plugin. It's no longer supported, hasn't been updated in 6 months or 12 months or whatever. You love the product, but WordPress has moved along. It needs to be updated. You hope for new things to be added to the product, etc. And this actually just happened with us with Editor's Kit. We love Editor's Kit. It's such a cool tool. Jeffrey had been, building it and was just pushing the envelope on what Gutenberg was, a year or 2 years ago. And he joined 10up, had an amazing opportunity there. Editor's Kit was kind of put on the back burner for him. Hadn't been updated in 9 months. We kind of reached out to him. It was like, hey, we want to like make sure this product doesn't go stale. Like, can we take it over? We'll invest in it. Extendify is very much so in active development and will always be in active development, and always pushing the envelope of what WordPress experiences can be. Doing whatever the latest thing is coming out in Gutenberg, we want to build that into Extendify while that new feature is still in beta. We want to just move people along as quickly as possible. The latest kind of opportunities for people to build their audience in WordPress, to monetize their audience. We want to make people as successful as possible in WordPress, and we're going to be constantly pushing the envelope with that. And that means that there's always going to be a core WordPress experience that is a paid experience. And we're going to take that revenue and reinvest it in our team, just hire amazing people, constantly build just the coolest product there is in WordPress for what we're doing. And when we think about that, and we weren't ready for the sort of like launching a paid offering yet. The product wasn't there, but we wanted to get it in users' hands. We really thought, okay, we want to have real users test this out, get some value from it. But what we don't want to do is put out this free product and then out of nowhere, some sort of have this like grand surprise that, oh, that free thing you've been using, it's actually going to be it's actually going to be a paid offering now. And that is really the idea of the beta. It's like we want to let people get their hands on it before we're ready with the paid plans, because we aren't, frankly. We haven't been, and we didn't want people to wait. But we wanted to be clear that eventually this will come out of beta, and if you're getting value out of it, we'd love you to join Extendify Pro and continue with us on this journey and help you build an amazing WordPress experience. But that kind of like bait and switch of like, hey, it's free now, but actually that thing that was free is not free anymore. That's really the idea of the beta. And so we have a way for people to register for the beta, kind of through the tool, takes them to our website, they register, we send them a license key, they enter that license key into the product in WP Admin, and it gets them right now full unlimited access. And that was what we thought was sort of the best balance of getting the tool in people's hands as early as possible, while also being transparent that like this is a beta thing. And so, have the right expectations if you go into it, and anything that anyone imports from Extendify, it's all open source. You get to keep it. Like after the beta, you can just stop using Extendify and it's yours. It's open source. But for all those users that are getting a ton of value out of it, and we know a lot are, you can continue with us with Extendify Pro once we launch those paid offerings.
Yeah, cool. I've been super engaged in the WP MRR community, and I have notifications on for like every post or every comment because I just want to keep up to date and like keep things rolling. And Alex Denning wrote a really cool article that was shared in the community around like how to be successful using this freemium model in the WordPress space. So like .org, free plugin, how do you upsell into pro? Like, should you even do that or should you just do a premium? We were like talking in the comments. It was a really interesting conversation. But I really like the idea of, look, I like as much as anybody else providing free stuff for everybody as much as possible, even the playing field. That's great. Yep. But a business has to be somewhat financially successful as well, especially a funded company. So I think that I really am interested in that idea of doing a beta in order to, one, get users in the door using it, but two, to make it so that you're letting everyone know, like, we're launching a paid plugin, but like it's going to be awesome. Like we're really like focused on making it like add enormous value through this beta. And that to me, I think makes that jump from like the free to premium a little easier because you have, not just a product with like 3 more things you can do.
Yeah.
You have a product that you've really like battle tested for however long, 3 months, 6 months, a year, battle tested is a good way to put it. And so that when it launches as a paid plugin, that people are going to pay for it and that they're going to get enough value they're going to get enough value from it over the long term that they're not going to churn, or the churn rate's going to be significantly lower. So it kind of is like, it seems like a great direction to go. Maybe instead of that freemium model of like the free, let's just launch a free plugin and that's how we'll get our paid users. You could, instead of going that route, you could just do a beta and go then directly, maybe it's like a paid version, and then maybe there's also a free version after that. But the beta sounds like an interesting way instead of like the free plugin, in order to like really put your plugin or put your product or put your services through a pretty rigorous testing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's like an element of, you can't hide your product from your users. Like you need to like get it in users' hands and see if they find value from it. And so you have to figure out some way to do that. And at the end of the day, people vote with dollars, right? If you have a paid product and see if there's enough value. And amazing businesses have been built in the premium only part of the WordPress ecosystem, the WP Rockets and whatever. And that's amazing. I think that's a completely valid model. I think freemium is completely valid too. I think I've heard too many times the premium part of freemium being an afterthought, and it, again, you never want to kind of take things away from users that they already have built their website around and whatever. And so like, if you're really kind of adding premium as an afterthought, then you're like, really have to be like, come up with something new, something incremental, which can be challenging. And, at the end of the day, I think if the products that people are releasing are, the thing that ends up on someone's site is open source, it's all like, kind of like by the rules there, then I think it's fair game to build a business around what you're building, because again, no one wants to see their favorite plugin not have an update for 10 months and not be compatible with the latest whatever jQuery or whatever have you. And so I think building a business is important, and at the end of the day, users are happy when they have awesome products supported by brilliant engineers with fantastic support teams, et cetera. So if it's freemium, if it's beta, if it's premium only, I think they're all fair. But one way or another, you have to get your product in customers' hands.
Boom. Great place to wrap up for the day. Thanks for jumping on, Artur. This has been awesome. We've kind of caught up outside of recording a podcast a lot, but it's really cool to just, honestly, for me to just get a chance to like pick your brain and hear your answers on stuff. So yeah, very cool having you on. A couple of things as we wrap up. One, where can folks find you online? How can they find Extendify, you, social media, all that jazz?
Yeah, so the best places really are keep an eye out on extendify.com for the kind of like our updates and the latest in terms of our next version of the product and launching our plans in the coming weeks or months here. At Extendify Inc. is the company Twitter. We'll be active there. The other thing that I'd say is. So folks have gotten to hear a little bit about my background, and I would say that Chris, my co-founder, who also just brings this incredibly like unique set of experiences and perspectives to WordPress relative to what most WordPress folks have gone through around growing a business, acquisitions, investments, all this stuff. And the reality is, if you're out there and you're facing any of those questions, whether you're trying to like sell your company, you're trying to acquire a company, you're trying to raise funding, you're trying to do some partnership with someone, whatnot. I mean, the reality is we bring a level of sort of experience and expertise around that isn't as prevalent in this ecosystem. If you're going through any of those things, shoot me an email, Artur, A-R-T-U-R @extendify.com, or my co-founder Chris at extendify.com. And we're happy to chat. Like, that's one of the ways we give back in the ecosystem is lots of folks are going through these experiences that we've gone through many, many times, whereas others have not. And so we're always happy to engage there. So feel free to shoot us an email also. That's an easy way to get a hold of us.
Cool, man. I was just thinking this morning, like acquisitions, whether you're buying, I guess some people, if they're in the buying space, they're pretty experienced in it, but like, when you're selling a business, like you only do it for a short period of time. It's like most people don't have like years of experience selling a business. Most people have like months maybe, and it's like one time or maybe twice. So that experience is very valuable. So thanks for sharing that. Reach out to Artur with any questions about that. You can also go to extendify.com. I was moving around the site. I clicked the little chat in the bottom right, and I saw Artur's picture as one of the pictures coming up. So he's still right he's grinding. He's right on the front lines with his team doing stuff. So while he's still there, you can catch him and his team right on Extendify site as well. Cool. Artur, last thing I like to ask our guests to ask our listeners for a little Apple Podcast review. So if you wouldn't mind asking folks to leave us a little review, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Go to your favorite Apple podcast, your favorite podcasting app. Leave that review for everyone, and share this on social wherever you can. Excited to see everyone online engage after this.
Cool. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. WPMRR.com/review. Redirects you right there if you're on Apple, or if you are on an Apple or Mac device. If you are new to the WPMRR podcast, check out WPMRR.com/podcast. 150-ish episodes in the backlog. Awesome. We got a search bar right there. You can find content on all sorts of stuff. So go listen to some old episodes and do some binging of some old podcast episodes there. WPMRR community has also launched. So just go to community.wpmrr.com if you're interested in joining a community where we try to grow our subscription businesses together. Virtual Summit, WPMRR Virtual Summit. We got a lot of like wrap up stuff today, Artur. So I just wanted to fit it in all at the end. WPMRR Virtual Summit is coming up September 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. WPMRR, all about monthly recurring revenue. It's the virtual summit. It's the one time a year we get together online and have some great talks by some fantastic individuals all about everything when it comes to growing a subscription and recurring revenue focused business model in the WordPress space. So you can also register for that just by signing up to be part of the community. So community.wpmrr.com. You can also check out the virtual summit space right there. Cool. That is it for this week on the podcast. We'll be in your earbuds again next Tuesday. Artur, thanks again for being on, man. It's been real.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
See you, everyone.